It's important for us to know what they did with those children.
Tonight, at the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls in Montreal, questions about what happened to loved ones at a Quebec hospital.
We need to get back to celebrating fur here and having local people wearing fur.
And Yukon trappers up their fur trade game. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls continues hearings in Montreal today. This morning, an Anishinaabe woman from Picogan spoke about kids disappearing in the late 50s. Danielle Rochette reports.
This morning's hearing was full of emotion and tears. Françoise Ruperthaus testified about her brother Tony and sister Emily, with her daughter Hélène by her side. Both children disappeared at a young age after a short stay in the Amos Hospital in Abitibi-Témiscamingue during the late 50s. They were then transferred hundreds of kilometers away to the Saint-Anne Hospital in Baie-Saint-Paul, which was often referred to as the Monster Hospital.
It's important for us to know what they did with those children. I was able to read a lot of articles, and I saw that there were medical experiences conducted on Native children. Is that what happened to our children, to my sister and my brother?
Françoise discovered in the 90s, after years of research, that her sister was still alive in Baie-Saint-Paul.
When we found her, I took care of her. But at that point in time, the hospital in Baie-Saint-Paul had kept her there for over 30 years, and never did they call us in the Abitibi, never did they provide information to my parents saying, your daughter's going well, your daughter's going through such and such a situation.
Françoise still has suspicions about her brother, even if her parents were informed of his death. They never really had evidence.
I think he always thought Tony died as a baby, but when we found out he died at the age of 7. But first of all, is he really dead? We are questioning.
Françoise wants answer for her 85-year-old mother who suffered all her life for the loss. She also made some very specific recommendations to the commissioners.
And I think there should be an investigation on those 2 disappearances. Who authorized someone to send the children to the Monster Hospital? That's how they call it, you know, it's the Monster Hospital. I think the government should apologize to all the parents and the mothers and all the families who have lost their children from hospitals.
Commissioner Odette said that this case is not isolated and that the inquiry has heard similar stories all across the country. Danielle Rochette, APTN National News, Montreal.
Today, for the first time, the National Inquiry heard public testimony from one of its own staff. Denise Pictou-Maloney testified about her mother, Anna May Aquash, and accused 2 advocacy groups of hypocrisy when it comes to her murder. Tom Fenario has the story.
The message that our family was given through this whole process is that my mother didn't matter.
In her testimony, Denise Pictou-Maloney pulled no punches. She says some of the people who advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women support the people who had a hand in her mother's murder.
Amnesty International wrote a letter of support for John Graham. It was like a punch in the face. After I had worked for 8 months with them to profile my mother, it's one of the top 100 cases in Canada for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
In 2010, John Graham, an American Indian Movement member, was convicted of the 1975 murder of Pictou-Maloney's mother, Anna May Aquash. In the 1960s and 70s, Aquash and Graham were high-level members of the American Indian Movement, also known as AIM. Pictou Maloney also took aim at the AFN support for former American Indian Movement head of security, Leonard Peltier.
We were disturbed with the conflict of interest that this represented, knowing that Leonard Peltier was at least complicit in my mother's murder for interrogating her and bad-jacketing her.
Afterwards, Inquiry Commissioner Michelle Audette took Pictou Maloney's testimony to heart.
I learned something today. I was supporting something without knowing that didn't respect your mom, and she does matter, even still today. And I will not support the organization anymore until they make a statement publicly. Thank you.
For her part, Pictou Maloney feels validated by Audette's response.
I felt comforted and justified because this was about educating people and about sharing with them the challenges that our families are dealing with on the ground.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
The Manitoba Crown Prosecutor's Office says it will not appeal the acquittal of Raymond Cormier, the man accused of killing Tina Fontaine. He was acquitted last month. Manitoba Justice says there are no grounds to base a successful appeal of the Raymond Cormier verdict. Cormier was charged in December 2015. Fontaine's body was pulled from the Red River in August 2014, wrapped in a duvet and weighed down with rocks. The federal government says it may be compensating a small group of residential school survivors. Details on that coming up after the break. Here's a look at Wednesday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. A rain-snow mix in Fredericton and St. John's and a high of +1. Sunny and 0 for Happy Valley, Goose Bay and Cartwright. +2 in Montreal, Quebec City and Sept-Îles where snow is on the way. In Southern Ontario, 0 in Sarnia, North Bay and Sault Ste. Marie. Those zeros continue into Timmins and Kapuskasing, +2 in Thunder Bay on Wednesday. A chilly day in Churchill, sunny and 21 below. -2 in Barons River and Gimli Harbor, 3 below in Dauphin. Over in Saskatchewan, +2 in Estevan, +3 in Swift Current, 1 above in Saskatoon. Sunny and +3 in Buffalo Narrows and Uranium City. Welcome back. The Yukon is celebrating fur and what it can bring to the local economy by connecting Yukon trappers to local artisans and to the people who want to buy and wear fur. Shirley McLean has more from the first ever Unfur-led event in Whitehorse.
Whitehorse is becoming unfurled as Yukon trappers and artisans displayed their furs and crafts made from locally sourced furs. Organizers say the purpose of the event is to create support for the local fur industry again, because Yukon trappers aren't faring that well on the international markets with low fur prices. A lynx pelt is selling for $60, whereas here this pelt can be sold for $250.
We need to get back to celebrating fur here and having local people wearing fur and wanting to have stuff with fur.
Kelly Milner says they're not trying to sell to southern fashion markets, but to open up the local market.
This is really about a local market. This is about connecting the trapper with the crafter who's going to make something with it and the person who wants to buy it.
Just seeing all this amazing artists come out and bring their wares out, and I'm always looking for a little bit of fur bling, and so it's awesome that they've got all of this stuff out, and you see a lot of the trappers and see a lot of elders coming out. It's a great way to unify community.
Products include everything from fur pelts to fur hats to moccasins to warm, functional items for the cold winter months.
So you want something for your hood? Do you want Wolverine or a wolf?
Tlingit trapper George Bame runs his family trap line on the weekends. He says it's an expensive hobby, but the work connects him to his ancestral land.
So those weekends are expensive, like snowmobiles, equipment and gear and gas kind of thing. So trying to increase our value and diversify the way that we can recover some of our expenses these events are really important to us.
Important to crafters like Gertie Tom, whose handcrafted moccasins and hats have been her livelihood for the last 70 years.
This is really something, you know, that more people come than regular craft sale, you know. And like, I know that lots of people come here for the fur.
Somebody just bought a hat from Gertie Tom, and you know, to be able to know where that was harvested, who made it, and they have a story now about a hat that they're going to wear that they feel really proud of. And those are the types of things that we want people to take away from this initiative.
Organizers say $60,000 of furs and crafts were sold, making the first ever unfurled event a success, and making a statement that wearing fur is still a northern thing. Shirley McLean, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Quite the event, and we'd like to hear what you have to say about it or any other story. Here's how to contact us. Send an email to news@aptn.ca, like our APTN National News Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter @APTN News, or go to our website, aptnnews.ca. Students abused by other students in residential school may get compensation. A lot of these cases, heard through the independent assessment process, had initially been dismissed. But today, Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett admitted some may have been entitled to fair compensation. The government announced it will pursue negotiated settlements of student abuse, those claims previously dismissed or undercompensated. However, it's estimated that the action would only affect roughly 240 eligible students. NDP MP Charlie Angus had mixed feelings about the announcement.
I'm really glad that the government is recognizing there's serious problems with the independent assessment process and the amount of cases that were falsely adjudicated and people didn't get their compensation. I find it odd that every time the St. Anne survivors go to court, Carolyn Bennett makes some kind of promise of dealing with reconciliation. I think that that's really cynical. If Carolyn Bennett is serious about addressing the issues in the IEP, then why has she got lawyers in court fighting St. Anne survivors?
As we've been reporting, there's been a spike in opioid overdoses in Alberta. It's a problem throughout the province, but it's hitting First Nation communities hard. Late February, southern Alberta saw 30 overdoses in 7 days. Most of those happened on the blood reserve. In response, the Alberta government announced they will be funding initiatives to try and stop people from overdosing. The province said it will spend $9.5 million to train family doctors in opioid addiction treatment. And they have provided the blood reserve with a temporary safe consumption site to tackle the crisis. The CEO of the Blood Tribe Department of Health says blood members can use the facility to learn about overdose prevention or to safely use substances.
Really what the overdose prevention site is all about is saving lives. If a person chooses to use the drug while in the trailer, they will be observed. If the individual does overdose, they can then provide naloxone. They have quick access to emergency services.
Big news from the National Hockey League for a pair of Indigenous athletes. Those stories and more coming up after the break. Here's the rest of Wednesday's weather forecast. Picking back up in northern Alberta. +7 under the sun in Fort McMurray. Sunny and 6 above in Fort Chipewyan. +2 in Red Deer and Calgary. Sunny and 5 above in Medicine Hat. On the west coast, +9 in Vancouver, Tofino, Campbell River, Port Hardy, and Bella Coola. 7 above in Prince George, Sandspit, Smithers, and Fort Nelson. A mild day in Yukon, +8 in Mayo. 7 above in Whitehorse. Not too bad in parts of NWT, +7 in Fort Liard and Trout Lake, +5 in Fort Simpson, -20 in Sax Harbor, -5 in Inuvik and Colville Lake. Downright chilly in Nunavut, -28 in Chesterfield and Repulse Bay, 30 below in Joe Haven, -38 on Wednesday in Resolute. Welcome back. It's been a busy week for NHL Indigenous legends who are touring Yukon communities. bringing motivational messages in the classroom and hard lessons on the ice. Shirley McLean has more.
It's not your average lunchtime floor hockey shinny game for these Teslin students. They're shooting against some of the great Indigenous hockey players that have hit the NHL ice, like John Shabbat, Aaron Asham, Lori Boschman, and others. There's 8 players in total, including Jason Simon, a former enforcer with New York Islanders who remembers the words his grandfather once told him.
Jason, always remember this, that you're Native, and you have one strike against you.
Simon had a reputation as a fighter and says he grew up in an alcoholic home on the Sarnia Reserve, but has put the gloves down and has found a new passion as a motivational speaker.
And my peers would bully me and then say, Jason, you're never going to make the NHL. Who do you think you are? Have a toke. Have a beer. I said, no. This is my dream. I will play in the NHL. And my grandma told me I can, and I will.
Like the students in the classroom, many of these players have come from small Indigenous communities.
We have so much stuff in common.
Reggie Leach grew up poor in Riverton, Manitoba. He won the Stanley Cup in 1975 with the Philadelphia Flyers. He stands next to his son Jamie Leach, who won 2 Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Reggie grew up in the same as Rick, in a really poor home, and you know, had lots of challenges financially, but he had lots of support from his community, his family. Myself, you know, I didn't have to worry about skates or sticks and that kind of thing, but we definitely had 2 different paths for sure. For me, he was more talented. Obviously, he was a good skater. My skating was not very good, but what I did was I worked hard.
Grade 9 student Tristan Kramer says he doesn't know any of these players. However, the message of fighting for what you believe in is ringing true.
Just basically get a mindset and keep your mind to it, and hopefully you get there.
And what would be your dream?
Hockey.
You're good right there. Right wing is left wing is here. Right wing.
And that is the lesson these former players are trying to teach the students in the classroom and on the ice. Only you can pick yourself up.
Get up like this and taking you all down. You got this.
Hockey is our vehicle, but it's not necessarily the vehicle that's going to take them to where they want to go. And hockey will teach them the hard work and the persistence that it takes to get there, no matter what you're doing.
The tour visited 5 Yukon communities, and the players have committed to lacing up again in 2019 to hit more of Yukon's small-town rinks. Shirley McLean, APTN National News, Teslin, Yukon.
Ethan Bear, a product of Ochapowace Cree Nation, stepped onto the ice as an Edmonton Oiler earlier this month. CTV Edmonton's Narama Issa reports.
Ethan Bear leads the way, and he takes off, and everybody waits by the bench and all by himself.
The solo pregame skate, a rite of passage for a rookie's first National Hockey League game. Ethan Bear getting that treatment on Thursday.
The excitement and, you know, the nerves and everything just clashing together was pretty cool.
Dozens of family members made the 9-hour trek from southeastern Saskatchewan to Edmonton to be in the crowd.
From my grandparents down, and, you know, some of my cousins and, you know, aunties and uncles, like, there's a lot of people that came, and, you know, I'm thankful for that, you know, have that support.
When your child has a dream like that and to see it become reality is all we hope for.
Bear was raised in Ochapowace Cree Nation, about an hour and a half east of Regina. The 20-year-old's rise to the NHL, a point of pride for his community.
Going back home and talking to those kids, like, it's just like I'm the same kid I grew up as when I was 12 years old, skating in those rinks, and, you know, going to school and on the res, you know, it's just, you know, I'm the same person, and they talk to me like I'm their friend, and we're all basically family. So it's fun for me, and it's, you know, I'm happy to have them behind me.
Dozens of Aboriginal players have laced up in the NHL. Fred Sasakamoose was the first, paving the way for players such as Carey Price and Jordan Tutu. Brandon Montour, another Indigenous player, tweeting his congrats to Bear. Seeing this representation on the ice, a big deal for the rookie.
It means a lot to me to watch them and, you know, cheer for them. Yeah, you know, both of those guys, you know, Tutu and Carey Price, they're all, you know, guys I looked up to growing up, and, you know, they just inspired me.
He'll look to pass that influence on to others.
I try hold myself the best way I can, you know, represent my family and my community the best way possible. You know, I just try to lead by example.
Narama Issa, CTV News, Edmonton.
And we're not done with NHL news yet. Zach Whitecloud, a member of Sioux Valley Dakota Nation near Brandon, has signed a contract with the Las Vegas Golden Knights, currently lurking in 4th place overall in the NHL standings. For the last 2 seasons, he's been playing for the Bemidji State University Beavers, a U.S. college team. Before that, he played for the Verdun Oil Capitals and the amazing Portage Terriers of the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. He's described as a stay-at-home defenseman with a lot of offensive potential. There's no word yet on when Whitecloud will suit up and play for Vegas. Elon Musk has announced a spaceship will be ready for short trips to Mars by early 2019. The SpaceX founder made the announcement during a surprise question and answer session at the South by Southwest Music Festival in Austin, Texas. Plans to touch down on the Red Planet were originally announced in September of 2017, with the ultimate goal of sending a cargo mission by 2020. An admission from one of the world's most iconic magazines, National Geographic. The monthly magazine is sold worldwide. Now its publishers are saying in the past its coverage of far-flung places and peoples was racist when those people weren't white. Editor Susan Goldberg says National Geographic ignored non-white Americans at home while portraying people overseas as exotic or savage. This month's edition of the magazine is dedicated to race, and they opened the archives to re-examine past issues. After a cold, long winter, residents in the Northwest Territories come together for a month-long Snow Castle Festival on Great Slave Lake. Each year, the castle grows to include more community projects. This year, youth took part in the biggest mural in the castle. This year at the Snow King Festival in Yellowknife, spectators are greeted by a mural made by youth from the neighboring community of Besho. 9 high school students created the piece for an expressive art project. In just 4 one-hour sessions, the artists participated in relationship-building activities, exploring creativity and feeling through art.
We cut shapes, like you can see them here, and the hearts on this one, and the glittery lens on this one. Those are all the shapes that we cut out of paper.
We drew a bunch of scribbles and we cut them out and we glue them on there and we just messed around with it and then we end up with that.
I wish we could say winter was over. That's your APTN National News for this Tuesday. Be sure to join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time for the live edition of In Focus. This week we're talking about Thunder Bay, the no appeal decision in the Gerald Stanley verdict, and the request for an extension to the National Inquiry. Now stick around. The Laughing Drum with Tim Fontaine is just minutes away. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Is it recording?
Yeah.
Hey, you have candy? You have candy?
No, this was the only one.
Was that great?